Hello, everyone. Welcome back to AOB, the podcast within a podcast. This is the podcast where we take you behind the scenes of our business that does over £100 million worth of property deals every year, and it's growing. So there's so much we can share. Rob, we're loving this new podcast.
Yes, as are people listening. Getting loads of feedback on this, which is great. So if you are enjoying it, let us know. Makes it more likely we'll keep it going. And if you've got anything you'd particularly like to hear about, then get in touch. So let's start, Rob, by talking about what's been going on in the business over the last month. And of course, it's a property business. It's always going to be dictated by what's going on in the property market. So what are you seeing out there?
We've discussed previously on the main podcast how sentiment in general is improving. And in the business world, we both network quite heavily. And that is definitely the case. A lot of business owners are feeling more positive about the state of the economy right now. And that's definitely the case with investors as well. But just as important as investors are developers, because you need property deals. You need to be able to do deals on developments. And understandably, last year, developers weren't that confident, but that is absolutely changing. And we can see that by the amount of deals that we are discussing with developers right now. We've just launched an off-plan deal to our Property Hub investors last week. That was the first one of the year. So every other deal we've done this year has been built, complete. Most people think we only do off-plan, but actually this year it's been stuff that's built that we've done deals on. And we've just done our first off-plan deal. And that is because a lot of developers were just waiting to see what happened with the market. But now there's confidence back. There's a lot of deals on our desk that we're going through and chucking some out and discussing further on others. And a lot of those are off-plan. But it's really interesting, Rob, how quickly that has changed. We went from not a single off-plan deal on our desk to a stack full, and that's in the space of weeks. But it's not just sentiment that's caused that. It's also developer finances improving as well.
Yeah, so I suppose as a developer, you need a couple of things. You need to have confidence that the market is going to be strong for the time that it takes you to build out your scheme, which could easily be more than a year. So you need to have a good level of conviction. And that's been missing for quite a while just because there's so much uncertainty. I've said on the podcast before that sentiment seems more fragile than ever before. So it's only now that we're seeing confidence really coming back at all levels. You see it in all the figures when you look at general retail housing market activity, but we're seeing it in developers as well. But then, of course, the second thing you need is for the numbers to stack up. And so developers, for the most part, are going to be using finance. They're not just going to be doing all their projects with cash. And the cost of finance, of course, as it has for everyone, has gone up over the last couple of years, but it's coming back down again. So developers over the last year or so have been paying as much as 15% for development finance. That's now come back down all the way to around 10%. So that is a giant shift, Rob. So lots of schemes that maybe they'd been planning previously were put on hold because they just didn't stack up anymore with those costs of financing. But now they're finally in a position to get going on them again. Now that costs come back down.
They are. And that was very much reflected the sentiment, the confidence and the access to better finance deals at an event I attended a few weeks ago called MIPIM. MIPIM is actually held in the south of France. I have no idea why they do it there. I'm not complaining. It's a lovely place to go in March. But it was really useful to be there to pick up on what is happening in the industry. Now, MIPIM, for those in the property industry, may go, oh, I know what that is. That's where people go and sit in the sun, pretend to work and drink lots of rosé wine. And it can be. But that's why I want to move the focus of this episode, Rob, over to the topic of focus. Because focus is something that we have been talking about internally a lot over the last few months. And it's something that we discuss between ourselves a lot as well. In fact, on our call this morning, we were talking about the power of focus and how we had all these different ideas, but we only want to do the ones that are the most important. And when I went to MIPIM, it's not the first time I've been a few times now, but it's the best one I've been to. And not just because people are more optimistic about the market, but actually because it was the most focus we've ever taken to that event. Before we went, we made a list of all the people that we would want to meet there. And we made sure that that was the ultimate priority. Any other invites, as glamorous as they were, got cast aside if it didn't help us achieve our core goals and meeting the core people that we wanted to meet. And because of that, the meetings we've now lined up post-MIPIM are absolutely fantastic and exciting. And for those who invest with Property Hub Invest, you should be excited because our network has expanded even further. And I believe we've probably got the best network in the UK with developers, but we've extended that further off the back of that event. But Rob, that's happened not because of my charm and wit in those meetings, but because of the focus we delivered before, during, and now post-event.
Well, it sounds like this whole episode is one big attempt to justify your expense claim. But beyond that, yes, it's definitely, it's one of those, any kind of event, you can make yourself feel productive by going to lots of networking events or like booking in meetings, because you never know, it might come to something. And that's not just when it comes to events like this, it's like anything in business. It's really easy to feel busy and feel productive. But actually, you're doing it more for your sake than the business's sake, because it's just to make you feel like, I'm working as hard as I can. Therefore, surely something is going to come out of somewhere and make everything work. But what you've done this time around is make sure that you're actually getting results. And I remember you saying to me, there was an afternoon when you didn't have any meetings because there weren't any meetings worth having. And I think that's actually showing real focus and real security, because you're not just going along to something to see what happens. You knew what your goals are, and if you're going to achieve them at some point over those few days, you don't need to fill the rest of your time just to make yourself feel better.
That's right. And I actually took it a step further than that. The next day I was due to fly back, but my afternoon just looked a bit weak in terms of what I could be doing, and it looked like I could pretend I was busy, but I didn't want to do that. So I moved my flight forward, flew back that evening, and was back in the UK to put a full day's work in the next day. That's focus. I could have easily just pretended to work that afternoon by going to some nice events, and I'm sure I would have had fun. And maybe you might be listening to this going, well, why not have a bit of fun? But actually, with what we're trying to achieve right now, focus is key. And it's not just this one event, Rob. This is all over our business right now. We just got what seems laser focus, not just us, far from it, from the entire team, but it's paying off big time.
Yeah, I can't quite put my finger on why it's landed differently this year, because we've always set goals for the year ahead and we've always had a process around that. But this time, maybe it's that we set very few goals. There's basically one main goal and two others knocking around feed into that other goal, but that's it. And so that in itself brings focus. But we've been far better, I think, at saying, for any idea that comes up, any opportunity that comes along, about really asking ourselves, does this serve our goals for the year? And if it doesn't, we don't do it. And that's something that we've never been any good at all in the past. But suddenly we're really good at it. And maybe you've got a better idea of why this is than I do, but it's so noticeable and it's made everything so much better.
I think it's important, Rod, to address why in the past we've done what we have and been like attracted by shiny objects. It's not a weakness of ourselves, I believe. At least that's what I tell myself. But it's actually a weakness of entrepreneurs in general, whether you are an entrepreneur at heart or you're actually delivering and building your own businesses out right now. You see opportunity. That's what entrepreneurs do. You see opportunity and you see interesting things. And sometimes you can look at the world in a different way. It goes, why isn't that there? That is brilliant, but it can also be destructive. It can work both ways, and it's normally one extreme or the other. It can be the next greatest idea that changes everything, or it could be an idea that actually takes you so far away from your core mission that you put the core mission in jeopardy. That can happen, and it easily happens. Those who've listened to the podcast for a long time will know that Rob and I have done quite a lot of businesses. Some have been wildly successful. We've had exits, and others less so. And I don't regret either of them, because actually, Rob, I think that's how we're able to focus now, is because we've had the pleasure, we've had the pain, and it's those lessons and that wisdom that allows us now to have that focus. But it's so difficult, and I think you have to learn. If you're the type of person that sees shiny objects and opportunities all the time, until you've tried a few and maybe occasionally got burned a little, hopefully a little, not too much, you then take those lessons, turn it into wisdom, and then apply it in your business. I don't think we could have done this 10 years ago, Rob. We could have listened to this podcast. We could have listened to people who've been in business a long time and heard them talking about this concept. But I believe that until you've been through it, at least for the vast majority of people, and learned those lessons, it's hard to implement them. So I do believe it's now our experience, or maybe a little bit of maturity and that wisdom that we've gained over the years that has allowed us to get to this point where we just not only appreciate focus, but actually have shifted so much that we are pushing away the shiny things. And there's loads. Our ideas list is huge. It's absolutely massive. But the amount we actually now bring forward is minuscule.
Yeah, and I know I've said it to you in the past, but I don't think I've said it on the podcast before, but that list is one of the ways that I manage this tendency in myself. Maybe this is something, because I was trying to think, like, how can somebody who's not at that stage yet listen to this and actually take something away from it and act differently as a result of having listened to this? Because you're right. Years ago, I would have listened to this and gone, oh yeah, that sounds sensible. And then I would have ignored it. So how can someone else avoid doing that? And maybe this next thing will help, which is whenever I've got an idea, as an entrepreneur, as you said, I think the fun part is coming up with the idea and thinking about all the great things it could do, and maybe even planning out how you'd launch it or execute it or whatever. And like, that's the reward, and you get the dopamine from doing that. So I've started allowing myself to do that. So if I have an idea that I get really excited about, I'll give myself half an hour or whatever to write down what it is and why I do it and what a launch plan for this might look like and how you'd measure success and all this different stuff. And by the time I've got to the end of that, I've had my reward. I've had the dopamine. I don't feel the need to do it anymore and go back to focusing on what I was supposed to be focusing on. But also the byproduct of that is you've kind of got this whole folder of like mini business plans. So at some point when the time is right, you can come back to those and go, well, those are rubbish. And what was I even thinking? But this one actually fits quite nicely with what we're trying to do right now. So maybe that's a practical takeaway from this, where you can sort of like get your entrepreneurial hit without distracting yourself for too long from what you're supposed to be doing.
Yeah. I think that's a great way of approaching it, Rob. Or put a post-it note on your computer or laptop saying, does this take me closer to my goal? Whatever your goal is. And I've noticed in my own personal life, Rob, the amount of annual goals I set now seems to reduce each year. And I don't think it's a lack of ambition. I really don't, because they are still ambitious goals or things that are important to me. But I've recognised that over the years, I put far too many things down. And I might achieve 40, 50% of them, but there's a big chunk that I don't. So now I have my core goals, and anything I achieve beyond that is a bonus, but I want to hit 100% of my core goals. Another way of doing it, if you're in business, is get a really good business coach. And not all business coaches are really good. So do your research to make sure they are really good. But they should be challenging you all the time when you come up with your latest, greatest idea. Is this the right thing to be doing? Or if you just want this discipline in your life, I've never used one, but possibly a life coach might be able to help you with this type of thing. Try Fiverr for a cheap example of it and see if you take to it or not. So I think it's, if you don't have that self-discipline, use somebody else to help guide you with your discipline, and you will be more effective. And that is what this is all about. It's not about being boring. It's about achieving more. Focus brings results, and results will make you happier. So yes, you'll get that endorphin hit, Rob, as you say, by thinking of all these exciting things. But you get a huge endorphin hit when you start to deliver on your big goals, the things that are the most important, because you've given it that focus.
Yeah, we did a webinar for our Property Hub Select clients a couple of months ago now, where we're talking about our goal setting process. And those are a couple of things we mentioned. First of all, having fewer goals. So you can't be pushing the boundaries in every area of your life all at once. It just doesn't work that way. And it's far more satisfying and meaningful to make significant progress in one area than to, make a little bit of a gain maybe in 8 different places. And the other thing was accountability in whatever form, having someone to keep you on track. And this is something that I've done more and more of, which is kind of weird in a way, in that my entire life has been a drive to get away from having a boss and having anyone tell me what to do. And now I'm hiring people to tell me what to do because I can't get it done on my own. Over time, you get to know yourself and know where you often fall down. And there's nothing wrong with bringing in help. And I really like the Fiverr life coach idea. That's a really good way of dabbling with it and seeing if it works without it being a big commitment.
Another thing we'll be focusing on is how the property market goes from here. By telling you the information we have today about more deals on our desk, developers being more optimistic, that for me is an early sign that property values could start to increase in the coming months. I mean, they have been slowly creeping up, but the optimism shown now is the strongest I've seen it in quite a while. And that normally translates to a more active property market, more activity with investors. And you know what, Rob? That's why I love talking about these things on the podcast, because I feel like we get our audience ahead of the curve, because we are seeing it day in, day out. We're on the ground, and we can bring that information to our audience. And of course, to our investors at Property Hub Invest. And if you would like to find out more about Property Hub Invest and find out if it's a good match for you and your property goals, well, head over to propertyhub.net/invest. That's propertyhub.net/invest. fill in your details there and we'll be in touch.
Yes, indeed. Thank you for listening. And again, do let us know what you think of these Any Other Business episodes and what you'd like to hear more of. Instagram is a good place to reach us directly. I am at the Rob Dix and Rob is Rob_Bence. And we will see you right back here on this feed on Tuesday for Ask Rob and Rob. See you then. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.